Welcome to another episode of Mental Wellness Insights, bringing sunlight into mental health. This week's episode is a continuation of last week's discussion on indecisiveness. Indeed, we have learned a lot about indecisiveness. Fear is the greatest cause of indecisiveness. Negative child experiences, trauma may cause indecisiveness. We are told, do not blame yourself, do not judge yourself once you have made a decision, no matter the outcome. Indecisiveness can cause stress, anxiety, and depression. We grow when we take healthy risks. The way we relate to the self will manifest in the way we relate to other people. In other words, how we relate to ourselves should be reflected on how we relate to other people. This and many more. Watch the continuation of this conversation. Blessings. What psychologically causes this imbalance between my outward appearance and what is happening inside of me?
Such a good question, Pamela. And I believe, like most things, I think most things start in childhood, because if we're raised in environments where we are taught congruency, where parents are kind at home and they're kind in public, where mom and dad are kind to each other at home and kind in public, and the parents and the kids are treated, with respect at home and respect in public, that teaches congruency. Mm-hmm. However, many families, there's a lot of dysfunction at home. Yeah. A lot of fighting, drug abuse, physical abuse, all sorts of things. And then the people go out and they put on their happy face and they're the perfect husband or the perfect wife and the perfect kids, but that's not true behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. So the perfection on the outside does not match the terrible, it's beyond imperfection, it's the terrible toxicity. So people learn to put on a mask, and that's an age-old, it's not something in current society alone, it's an age-old issue with humans. And I think that that's where the term two-faced comes from. Yeah. One face here, another face there. And ideally, and it is somewhat worse in today's world because of social media and the pervasiveness of images, where people tend to believe that everything out in public should be pretty, should look, and they're hiding what they really look like. They're hiding so that they can match other people, rather than really working to carefully curate images behind the scenes that are authentic. Yeah. Really be one and the same, because it takes an awful lot of work to be two or three or four different people. Exactly. You can't always. And now this is it. We are trying to be perfect when ideally human beings are not perfect. Absolutely. No one is perfect. And I believe that, of course, we're all imperfect, but it's not an excuse. Some people use imperfection as an excuse, and they say, well, I'm imperfect, so I can be however I want. I can yell at my kids, I can kick the dog, I can scream at my wife, whatever. Mm-hmm. And no, imperfection is not an excuse. Imperfection is an invitation. Yeah. To constantly work at being a better person. Mm. Yeah. But you can only work at a better person if you know what it is to be a better person. Absolutely. And some people don't know what it means to be a better person. And quite honestly, Pamela, some people don't want to do the work involved to be a better person. Sad but true. Yeah. Now, why does somebody not want to work at being a better person when clearly being a better person is what people should be
aiming at?
I too am mystified by that. And because to me, one of the reasons we're on the planet is to make ourselves better, to make the world a better place, to leave the next generation better off than we were. But for many people, that's my value. You know, that's my moral code. That's what's important to me. For some people, the quest for power or money, fame, success, whatever you want to call it, is so high up on their totem pole that the idea of being a good person or doing self work, they'll invest 18 hours a day at making money.
Yeah.
The idea, or taking care of themselves or having fun. But the idea of slowing down to do the most important work, again, from my perspective, to do the most important work, that is, they don't value it.
They don't.
It's all about what we value. And we must, and that's why in the book realm, you'll see so many people who are, have terrible personal lives. But when they have a choice to pick up a book at a bookstore or in an airport, are they picking up a self-help book? Or are they picking up a distracting magazine or a distracting work of fiction?
Mm-hmm.
They'll take the easiest route. And not that fiction is bad or magazines are bad, but we can see that the cures are available to us. Support is available. Direction is available. There was a time where we couldn't say that, where people didn't have a community, where someone lived in a rural, and there's still, of course, situations like this, where someone lives in a rural setting and is getting abused, and they don't know, they don't have resources, and that's all they know. But in today's world, with psychoeducation at the level it is, most people know what is healthy and unhealthy. Most people have access to some form of support. And people who want to make their lives better, who want to be advocates for change, which of course you're clearly an advocate for change. You're doing things to make the world a better place. And tells me a lot about your values.
Yeah.
So we look at where do people put the most amount of their time, and that is clearly what's important to them.
Yeah. Clearly, a lot of things that are happening in the world emanate from the home environment.
Yes.
It starts from how you have been brought up, the situation at home, and it escalates to the adulthood. And then it is a vicious circle, because you will hand it over to your children, and so what is supposed to happen?
So the idea that you're talking about, and at its worst, it's called the intergenerational transmission of violence.
Yeah.
Violence is learned and it's transmitted from parent to child and parent to child for generations to come. And I do have to say, though, there are some kids who grew up in great environments, wonderful environments, who make choices that lead them down the wrong path, or so I do have to say it's not 100%, but the childhood environment does help create who we come to be.
Yeah.
And I know many people who grew up in very negative childhood environments where they took that. I mean, my childhood environment was far from easy. But I use that as a jumping point to say, I want to be a force for good. I want to do it differently. I want to support mental health. And when we do that, sometimes it comes at great personal expense, as it did to me when we forge our own way in the world. But that's what we have to be willing to do. We have to be willing to shift. And it's one of the reasons that, so many of my clients, I just admire them so much. They'll come and they'll say, I'm thinking about having kids, or I have kids, and I went through this in my childhood environment, and I don't want to carry it on. I want to do it differently. And that just so impresses me, because I am impressed by people. Very little in life impresses me as far as wealth or status or whatever that's
Yeah.
right. Impresses me as someone who's a good person.
Yeah.
Somebody who wants to do better. I find that extraordinarily wonderful. And so I think that's what we can do. We can look, not blaming or shaming our parents or how we were raised or ourselves. I certainly, we all make mistakes. But instead, if you're going to look at the past, look not with an eye for shame or blame, but an eye to, what do I want to do differently now?
Yeah.
What do I want to do differently? What did I learn? How can I change? How can I make the world a better place? And so I think that's the biggest gift we can give, is to see where we went wrong or where somebody wronged us and make a positive shift, a very mindful shift. And that is really the essence of my next book.
Yeah.
I start with childhood, and I say we all have stuff from our childhood. Even if you had a great childhood, you probably had some things that were miswired in your brain. And so if we go back and we look at it, and we don't blame it or judge it, but study it to learn and create change.
Yeah. Now back to indecisiveness. In our society, particularly, there are people who are stuck in toxic relationships, and particularly toxic marriage, that to make a decision becomes it looks like becomes difficult for them. So they keep on in that relationship. Others end up killing each other. Why is it so difficult to decide?
It's such a good question, Pamela, and a very deep one, because the bond of marriage, depending upon your religion, depending upon your upbringing. I was raised in a Catholic environment where we were taught that marriage was till death do you part, and that God does not believe in divorce. And so if you're raised in an environment like that and you're indoctrinated to believe that you must stay in marriage or God will hate you, God will do kind of thing, that's very powerful on the brain. Those messages are very powerful.
Yeah.
And many religions have ideas that are much the same, that marriage is for life. And when it's a healthy marriage, and one marriage, if an imperfect marriage, because all marriages are imperfect, then that lifetime commitment makes sense. But for many people, if the commitment is toxic, then it doesn't make sense to stay. But it's not a simple decision, because often, again, there's a religious or spiritual beliefs. Sometimes there are just beliefs within a family that the marriage should stay. So you're often fighting belief systems, values, morals that tell you, moral codes that say you should stay. And all of these various ideologies can keep people stuck, because again, it becomes fear-based. If I make this change, I will not be loved. I will not be, loved by my family or my God or whatever it is. So those are some of the reasons. Then let's move to the pragmatic reasons. For many people I work with who are looking at divorce, it's not so much a spiritual or religious belief that holds them back, but sometimes it's children. And they believe I should stay because I have young children. And to me, that is one of the biggest reasons not to stay. Yeah. If you're in an unhealthy marriage and you're staying just for the kids pick up on the toxicity. The kids are learning that love is two people who don't like each other, or two people who fight, or two people who aren't really connected. So you have a bad marriage, you're teaching the children to stay in a bad marriage. So if you're staying just for the children and that's the only reason, not a great idea for anyone. Now, third piece that I see happens so much is financial. Many times, particularly for women, they are in a situation where they got married, they put their career aside if they had a career, and weren't, or maybe they had a career as a stay-at-home mom, but they're in a situation where they look and they say, oh my goodness, if I leave this marriage, how will I support myself? How will I feed myself? How will I feed my kids?
Mm.
That's another matter altogether. I mean, there are some times where the pragmatics, I'm not advising that someone stay in a situation that's abusive,
Yeah.
but somebody might stay in a marriage because they say, if I leave the marriage, I will have no food, clothing, and shelter. And so they make a conscious decision to stay because they choose the known of an unfulfilling marriage with the unknown of living maybe on the street. And, here in the US, homelessness is a huge problem. In our community, homelessness is a huge problem. And so I never underestimate somebody's concerns. Now, again, if somebody's being physically abused or abused in ways that are untenable, then there are shelters and ways to help people get started. And I'm not saying men are never abused in marriages. That does happen, but it's overwhelmingly women who are abused. Mm-hmm. So that we have to look at each situation. And for some people, and this is also a big piece, they stay in a marriage that's not fulfilling because it works for them, because it's comfortable, because they have a nice house, because they have, their needs met, generally material needs. So they might not get their emotional needs met, but they stay because their material needs are being met. And again, not judging any of it, but there are so many reasons people stay.
Yeah. Now, is it true that when a parent is too strict, parents are too strict on their children, it leads to issues like indecisiveness, like a parent could be over criticizing their children when they make certain decisions. A parent could put a lot of pressure on children, and does this have any effect on the child's decisiveness in future?
Absolutely. I think that strictness in itself isn't a problem.
Yeah.
I think that children, depending on how we're looking, strictness is on a spectrum. Yeah. And some children need a lot of rules, a lot of strictness, so to speak, a lot of guidelines. Mm. Some children don't. So I think always having clear, consistent, healthy guidelines is essential for parenting. And it takes work and effort. And a lot of parents get very tired or annoyed, so they don't keep with the strict and consistent guidelines. And the children get confused, and then they act. And I have had in my office kids literally climbing on their parents' heads, and the parents doing nothing because they don't know how to set boundaries and guidelines. Mm-hmm. And so the child is running the show, but the child doesn't want to be running the show. They may act like it, but really children do their best when they're given safe, consistent guidelines. We all do our best when we have safe, consistent, meaningful guidelines. They have to mean something to us. Arbitrariness doesn't help. But if, as you said, if a parent is critical, overly strict, like there's no meaning to it, or arbitrary, or heavy-handed, or constantly top-down, talking down to the child, right? Then the child will certainly learn to be either indecisive and not make any decisions because they're afraid of getting it wrong, or will learn to overreact and make quick decisions because they're just going to make any decision before somebody tells them no. So that's so important to look at, that want to have those consistent parameters. We want to be mindful with our children. If we're saying no, we want the no to have a meaning, right? We don't want to just, no, you can't go out tonight, or no, you can't play with your neighbor. We would want to say, well, no, you can't play with this neighbor because it's nap time now. Or no, you can't go out to this party at 10 o'clock at night because there are no parents supervising it. We want to have meaningful guidelines.
Meaningful guidelines. Very important. Yeah. Okay. We are getting to the close, but probably I would request that you, if you think there's anything that we haven't touched on.
It's such a good thought, Pamela. There are always things I'll leave out probably and miss that are so important. But in the realm of indecisiveness alone, I think we got a really lovely grip on that topic, on relationships and communication and talk, all of that. We could probably talk on each one of those for a long time. But I do think we hit the really important pieces. And just one last piece that came to me. If you're a person who suffers with being indecisive, one of the best things you can do, other than looking at pros and cons and goods and bads, and like looking at the list, is learn to just make a decision. Make your best decision. Start with little ones. Start with, which kind of bread should I buy today? I'm going to buy this or this one. Okay, I'll buy this one and just leave it be. So start with little decisions that don't have a big impact. And see that when you start making these little decisions with confidence and without second guessing yourself, you will build that internal confidence to make bigger and bigger decisions in that same way that says, what do I need? What's best for me? Okay, I'll make that decision, and then just leave it be.
Mm-hmm. And I guess parents should let go of too much grip on their children and help them start making decisions from a very early age.
Absolutely. And not, we don't want to give a 5-year-old the ability to decide what college they're going to go to. They just don't have the mental capacity.
Yeah.
But we can give the 5-year-old the choice between, do you want corn as your vegetable, or do you want spinach as your vegetable?
Yeah.
We can start giving choices early on. We can give a choice when it's playtime. Do you want to play with your coloring book, or do you want to play with your trucks? Not judging them, and give them slightly bigger ones. Like, do you want to help me make pancakes? And do you want to help me sweep the floor? And if they make a mistake in any of those activities, or say, oh, I wish I had picked ice cream instead of apple pie, don't blame them and shame them and say, I told you should have had apple pie. Say, oh, well, next time we'll choose apple pie.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I must say you are doing superb work on that line, creating awareness on mental wellness. And this is what our channel is all about, mental wellness insights. Thank you for watching this week's episode, a continuation of the conversation on indecisiveness by Dr. Carla Manley. Dr. Carla Manley is an author of several books, among them Joy from Fear, Aging Joyfully, The Joy of Imperfect Love, and Date Smart. These books are all available at Amazon. Please remember to subscribe to this channel, like, comment, and click on the notification bell. Watch out for next week's episode, another very interesting conversation with two pastors on pastors' mental health. Blessings.